Okay, the first thing that pops to my mind that I wanted to ask you is, I've noticed over the years that people with schizophrenia broke down into 3 different classes, and we've talked about that before. There was the segment, and that breaks up into about thirds. The segment who believes what psychiatry tells them, that the voices are hallucinations, they're not real, that there's nothing they can do about them other than take these powerful psychotropic drugs for the rest of their lives, and that they're not real. The second group is a group that's confused. They're not quite sure whether they're real or not. They don't know what they are. They're not sure how they react, but they know that they're bad. The people they've talked to, for the most part, psychiatrists and counselors are telling them that these things are hallucinations, but that's not their experience. Their experience is that they are very real, but they don't know that for sure. They suspect it, and they're kind of confused about what's going on. They don't fully buy psychiatry's explanation that the voices are hallucinations, but they're not quite sure that they're not themselves either, because we've been taught all our lives that whatever you hear in your head is you. That's you talking. So it's very confusing for them. The third group are the group that know that these things are entities. They don't quite know what to do about them, but they know that they are not who they are. So
was the one that bought hook, line, and sinker the tale that the psychiatrists give them.
Yeah, those are the ones that are the most far gone. The systems that we found that will help these people and a lot of times will lead to a cure will not work with those people. As long as they believe the voices are hallucinations, there's nothing that can really be done for them except take the toxic meds that psychiatry dishes out. So my question to you would be the group, from your experience, the middle group, the group that needs to be turned around to believing the truth, that these things are entities that are affecting them and are not hallucinations. How do we go about convincing those people, or how did you find through your progress when you were dealing with these things that what you were hearing was not you?
Well, I knew right off the bat. I just knew that they were not me. So I sensed it. And a lot of people do that. And there's no formula for, here's what I did to figure out that these were not me. I knew they were not me. They were inconsistent with what I was thinking. And they were inconsistent with how I was feeling. So I knew how I was feeling, and I knew how I was thinking, and then these thoughts came in that were contrary to that. So that's the first group. And they're the most open to the idea that these are entities, these are living beings with a consciousness. And the second group that doesn't really know what they are, but they know they're not them. I would think that those would be a lot easier to point to, here, take a look at this. You don't have to agree with it right off the bat, but consider that that these are not your voices, right? They're not coming from you. So where are they coming from? It doesn't matter where they're coming from as long as you know they're not coming from you. So if they don't want to believe that they're demons or living beings, I don't think that really matters that much. I think what's important is that they know that they're not coming from them and they're not their thoughts. So then they can look at the thoughts that are coming in and know that what those thoughts are telling them are flat out lies. The problem that I see is that so many people have been brainwashed into believing that they're not enough, that they'll never be good enough, they'll never be smart enough, they're too fat, they're too skinny, they're too tall, they're too short, they're not smart. They get that drummed into them as children. So then the voices just play on that. So there's a double whammy here where a person has to believe in themselves But how do they do that when all they've ever heard was lies about themselves? And that's just played up by the voices. So the thing is that if you can get somebody to actually see that they've been lied to about who they are, what they are, how they are, that'll get them thinking about it. But that's a hard road to go on. I mean, it's a tough thing to realize, well, okay, maybe I really am a good person. That's hard to believe, you know. So, I mean, they just have to work on it. They have to work on it every single day. It doesn't come naturally. Not when they've been brainwashed like that.
And how do you suggest they would do that?
Well, I don't know for sure. There's no one good answer. I mean, there's a lot of different avenues they can they can talk to other people. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that they go to a psychiatrist, because a psychiatrist isn't going to tell them, well, you really are a good person no matter what you think. And just because maybe you did some bad things doesn't make you a bad person. You know, they're not going to say that, I don't think. Are they?
No, they're going to leave that office with some kind of drug.
Yeah.
Maybe after 15, 20 minutes, they'll be given some kind of drug. And with schizophrenics, it would result in a chemical lobotomy. Wouldn't solve anything. Now, what I found surprised me when the one time that I've heard these things, and after praying to hear them, was that their voice in my head sounded just like all the other thoughts, you know, the tens of thousands of other thoughts that go through my mind in a day. There was no change in the timbre or the volume, or it sounded just like another one of my thoughts, only, you know, I knew it wasn't.
Yeah, so that's the big trick. So if a person is already brainwashed into thinking they're no good, or they're flawed in some way, and then here comes a voice that sounds just like your own thought that drums that in, you know, I mean, if a person really wants to get over this, they're going to have to stop and think, is that true? Well, if they're brainwashed into thinking it's true, their first idea is going to be, yeah, it's true. I really am I'm flawed in this way. So then, you know, they have to, I think the first thing that comes to my mind is tapping, where you tap and you do the karate chop, you know, the tapping routine, where you do the karate chop on your hand, and then you're saying something like, even though I feel like I'm stupid, I totally love and respect myself. Even though I think I'm flawed and I'm a bad person, I totally love and respect myself. You say that over and over again, and then you do the tapping points, saying those things. That will actually trigger your subconscious and your meridians, and eventually they'll make you stop and think, well, okay, so is that really true? Am I really this bad person? That, you know, I've been called a bad person, I've been called a stupid person, I've been called a knucklehead, I've been called, you know, just all kinds of different names by other people. Is that really true? And if they can get it through their heads that it's not true, you know, that's just the brainwashing coming out of the people that are calling them the names, and they don't know any different either. That's their upbringing, but it's not your upbringing. What you're getting is programming from others. You're not programming yourself. So that's the challenge, is to program yourself.
And to overcome of the reasons that the psychiatric mafia gives for schizophrenia, you know, they started blaming mothers, then they went to genetics. They went to these advanced reasons that the average man and the average practitioner cannot either debunk or prove. So they went to the genetic theory, saying there's some kind of genetic thing wrong. Then they went to the chemical imbalance theory, and then there's something wrong with their brains. The only one that has any substance, from what I can see, is the environmental theory, where what I've seen over and over again in my practice in the years I've worked on the front lines in mental health was that virtually every schizophrenic I spoke to either had a massive amount of physical, sexual, or emotional abuse by their parents or somebody else, which was negative programming, or they were using drugs, especially amphetamine. So here you have years and years of programming by a bad family or a negative situation or years of sexual abuse that they can't talk to them. They have all this built up inside, and they're told they're bad. They're told they're rotten. They're told they have no worth, and this is emotionally drummed into them. And then all of a sudden you go, well, how am I going to even begin to question this? And then the voices jump in there, and they just feed the fire.
Yeah, see, the abuse opens up the door for the voices to come in.
Yes.
And the person already has been told numerous times that they're no good. Then the voices come in and they just jam it down their throat and, blow it up even further than the humans did. And so here's the person being bombarded from all sides outside, coming from the outside, from the environmental side and from the voices side. They're just being bombarded over and over again. So it takes a lot of inner strength, which they don't have at the moment. They have to, first of all, they have to want to live a different life. So that's a challenge, because if they're used to living this downtrodden life, they don't know anything else. That's all they know. So they're going to have to think about it, and then the voices will come in and say, "Oh, that's really stupid. You'll never amount to anything," and blah blah blah. They'll punch that down every moment. So what I did, I was in the midst of all of that. I went through all of that. I had the brainwashing of the normal environment of a dysfunctional family, and then added on to that, I had all that horrific abuse. And, I got it from all sides. I got it from my parents. I got it from the Catholic orphanage. I got it from the juvenile detention center. I just got it everywhere I turned. I was a bad person. So I believed that I was a bad person. So but I somehow knew inside that I really wasn't a bad person, and I don't know how that happened. Might have been the Creator that was planting that in me, that there is a little spark in each one of us. There's a tiny little spark of spirit in each and every one of us, and it gets buried with slush and sludge and mud and crap and, just all kinds of garbage. And here's this little bitty light trying to shine through, and it will shine through if you let it. So I guess I got to this point of somehow realizing that there was a little spark in me that was all covered up, but it was there. I somehow knew that, and I wanted that to shine through. I didn't have the foggiest idea how to go about doing it, but I had the desire. And when you have the desire, universe is on your side. I can vouch for that. When you have the desire, universe is on your side, and things will happen in your life to help you, fulfill that desire. It has to be a deep desire. And even though you don't have the foggiest idea where to start, when you have that desire, universe will do something or cause something to happen so that, you'll start to go forward. And from there, you just go forward and you go forward and you go forward, and you're battling the whole time. You're shoving this stuff away, and it keeps coming back, and it keeps coming back even stronger because you're fighting it, right? That's what I went through. And before I came up with the That's a Lie program, it was about, I didn't come up with the That's a Lie program until I was 50 years old. So I went through all those years of battling. and trying and getting into, reading spiritual books and reading quantum physics and reading the scriptures. And, I knew I didn't want to go to church because I was already turned away from church because I knew that they were abusive because of my own experience.
So let me clarify a second. So number one, you're saying you have to have the intent. It needs to be your intention to work past this and to get out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. And number two, you actually started moving toward a positive spiritual path and seeking the opposite of what you were being told.
Yeah, I kept getting knocked down, but I kept on going anyway. It's like one of those, I don't know what movie I'm thinking of, but I want to say Gladiator movie or something where the guy gets knocked down and he keeps getting up and he gets knocked down and he keeps getting up and he continuously gets knocked down and he's just about beaten to death and he keeps getting up.
It doesn't give up.
That was me. And from knowing me that I don't give up.
I do that. I know that. And I don't either. I mean, that's one of the things I think we respect in each other. I mean, despite the beatings we've taken, we just get up and keep going.
Yeah.
But what about the voices are very sly about how they change reality. And I've seen a lot of cases where they will take stimulus originating in the environment and have the person interpret it wrong. For instance, those people are laughing at me, or those people are staring at me, or those people are talking behind my back, or, these are like basically innocuous cues, that most people would ignore, that the voices get people to take and turn against themselves.
Oh, for sure they do. They do.
How would you suggest people deal with that?
Well, they have to get to the point of realizing that what other people think about them is none of your business. I mean, it's none of my business what other people think of me, right? That's their business. It's not mine. And whatever they're thinking of me, whether it's right or wrong, is not my business. So if a person can get that through, that's a simple way to think about it. It's a more complicated thing than that for sure. But if a person can just, think of that, okay, so whatever they're thinking of me, it's not my business. So let me think about what I think of me. What do I think of me? Well, I think I'm scum. Well, that's a lie. So, I mean, you have to have this inner dialogue going on. And when you're first starting, like when I first started, it was a constant inner dialogue. And, I mean, of course, I was by myself a lot, too, so that was an advantage. If I had been around a family constantly, I don't know if I would have been able to be as successful as I was. And that goes contrary to what you're talking about, where they do like to isolate a person. In my case, I was isolated a lot in my life. And so I had this inner dialogue going on that was, some of my friends would always talk about me as to being the silent one, the quiet one. I'd be out in the backyard when everybody else was partying inside the house. I'd be out in the backyard and I'd be thinking, but I'd be more spacing out than thinking, And so people would say, well, what are you thinking about? And I'd say, oh, I don't know, just nothing really. I mean, and I really wasn't. I was just kind of getting in touch with myself and having this mild inner dialogue, sometimes mild, sometimes very warrior-like. But I had this inner dialogue going on of, I don't know, I'd hear something negative about myself. And then it'd be the thing of, well, this person's talking behind your back. And I'd say, you know what? I don't really care what they're saying because it's really none of my business what they're saying. So that helped me a lot. I don't know if it helped other people, but it helped me a lot.
Yeah, or who cares what they're saying? But I remember, when you first told me about the That's a Lie program, I knew it was true right away, because I'd worked with so many patients that their voices were telling them lies, and I was wondering, well, if you know they're lies, then why do you listen to them? And I kept asking them that over and over again. And the response I got was, because they sound so friggin' real.
They do
they are so friggin' convincing. Mm-hmm. So what do you do about that? Because that's going to affect them all. It's like they get sucked into what they're being told, and it agrees with the abuse that they've had in the past. Mm-hmm. So it's like a chain that why do you keep listening to them? And they go, because they're so damn convincing. What would you suggest to those people? And I'll tell you, that's a majority of them.
Yeah, I understand, because I went through that. And so what I found is, when it becomes a loop where the same idea, the same thoughts come back over and over and over again ad nauseum, then you know that that's really not coming from you. I mean, you're off doing your own thing, and all of a sudden here comes this loop that throws you for a loop. Really, I mean, it catches you off guard. You're in the middle of a conversation with somebody, and all of a sudden you get this idea that, they're laughing at you. They're just trying to be polite. They're not really meaning what they're saying. And so, and that'll go in a loop over and over and over again while you're trying to talk. So you're trying to talk over these thoughts. And then what I would do, I would usually try to excuse myself from the conversation or from the room. And then I'd just sit down and go and think, I'd let it flow, and I'd be watching this going on. And I'm like, I don't know how to get rid of this, but I know it's not me. So I had this major desire to get out of that loop, and I had no idea how to do that.
So you didn't try to resist it or stop it. You let it flow and watched it.
Yeah.
Okay, so like you were observing it as a third party.
Right.
So that kind of removed you from the situation and allowed you to kind of analyze what was going on to some degree.
Well, I didn't analyze it. I just watched it, like I was watching a movie. And so, and I don't know if everybody can do that. I would imagine that everybody could do that, but maybe not. I don't know. But if they have to know that this is not coming from them, and when it gets to the point of being a loop, a repeating loop over and over and over and over and over again, same thing over and over and over again, day after day, week after week, month after month, it's the same thing. And you're like, I can't get rid of this thought, right? It's like having a song play in your head all day long, and you just can't stop thinking about it, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's the same kind of thing. It's over and over and over again. And when that loop happens, whether it takes a day to realize it or a month or, a week or whatever, once you realize that it's a loop, that's when you can sit back and watch it and not take it in as real. Just watch it. And then you can say, I have no idea what this is, but I know it's not me. So then when you do that, you're not giving out any negative emotional frequencies. So you're not giving them any food.
Well, that's another question. How long and what was the process that you took before you realized that these things were parasites, that they were energetic parasites? What I've seen is that even though I would point that out to patients over and over again and say, well, after the voices leave, what's your energy level like? And they would say, well, it's down in the dumps. And I said, well, how many thousands of times has that happened to you? And they'd say, thousands of times. And I'm like, well, where does your energy go? And they would consistently say, I don't know.
Yeah, well, they don't know where their energy goes. They just know that their energy is gone. And so, I mean, when you stop and think about it, it's like, okay, my energy is gone. I have no energy at all. I have no idea where it went. I mean, that's knowing that your energy is gone. doesn't automatically equate to that the voices ate your energy.
No, it doesn't. But there's a one-to-one correlation between that, and I've seen the voices actually block their realization of that. You know, even if you point it out in many different ways, they just can't see it.
Yeah, I know that.
So how did you break through that?
Let me think. I don't think I broke through it right away. And I don't really remember when I came to the realization that these were entities. I think I got that when it was a combination of studying the biblical scriptures, and that led me to quantum physics. And then I knew when I realized in quantum physics that everything is energy. Up until then, I knew we were all just atoms, and that was a breakthrough in thought of, you know, we're just all floating atoms. So how I was imagining it. But when I got into quantum physics, which came from reading the scriptures, because what I saw in the scriptures was the words of the red printed words of Jesus. They were the most profound words to me. They were, you know, that I don't know how that led me to going to quantum physics, but I somehow knew that there was a science behind what he was saying. And that because he was saying things like, I don't remember the exact words, but he was saying things like, think about the things that are not as though they were, and then they will be. Well, that's quantum physics right there. You know, that's our energy going out into the universe, and if we're in frequency with what we want, then it manifests itself.
So like you get what you expect.
I don't know if it's what you expect, but you get what you are. What your frequency is what your reality becomes. If that makes any sense.
Well, it makes sense, but the question would be like, then how do you increase your frequency with these things constantly at your throat?
Yeah, imagination is a very powerful tool, and the voices use imagination to mess with perception.
Yeah, against you. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a very powerful tool on either side, the negative or the positive. So you can imagine the worst. And if you keep imagining the worst, guess what? The worst comes. If you imagine the best and you're in that frequency all the time, then the best comes.
So how would you suggest a paranoid schizophrenic who is paranoid and you know, halfway convinced that, you know, the perceptions of the voices are his own, would turn around and begin on a positive path to increase their frequency, or even to realize that these things are draining their energy? Well, that's the last thing they want these people to realize, is that they are energetic parasites. They get very upset when that topic is brought up.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're dealing with a paranoid schizophrenic, and you've dealt with them, I've never dealt with a paranoid schizophrenic. Well, I guess I did deal with one time on a project that I was on. And I took a cigarette break, and so he came out and he sat down on the bench with me, and he was very upset. And I said, "So what's happening?" And he said, I don't know if I can tell you this. And I said, "Well, you can tell me anything you want to tell me. I'm not going to judge." And so he said, "Well, I think I'm the Antichrist." I said, "You think you're the Antichrist?" And I already knew how the voices worked. So I thought, oh, this poor guy, he's being convinced by something that he's the Antichrist. If he was serious. Mm-hmm. And he was scared to death. And he didn't want to be the Antichrist. He was frightened to death. I could see it in his eyes. And I said, "Oh, hey, wait a minute. You are not the Antichrist." And he's like, "How do you know that?" I said, "Well, none of us are the Antichrist because, you know, I mean, you're a human being and the Antichrist is not a human being." And he's like, "Well, what if I came in human form?" And I said, "So have you, I forget how I talked to him, but anyway, I ended up with letting him know that he was a spiritual being, and he came from the creator that created all things, and that creator creates with love and not hate, and the Antichrist is hate. So I said, you know, do you hate me? He's like, no, I don't hate you. Well, I said, do you hate this person? No, I don't hate this person. Well, so the Antichrist hates everybody. So you can't be the Antichrist or something like that. Anyway, the end of the conversation was he realized that the thoughts going on in his head were not his own. And this was way before I developed the That's a Lie program, years before I developed it. So anyway, that was the story of that particular encounter. But he was very paranoid, and I don't know, I just said that, you know, he's a spiritual being, and he was made by the creator, and the creator makes things with love and not hate. And that was enough for him. I don't know if it'd work on anybody else.
Well, I'd say it was a good start. Now, what's ringing in my head is spiritual being. And, you know, in 4 years of undergraduate school, 4 years of graduate school, not once was spirit mentioned in any of the psychology classes. It's like it didn't exist. It was like being in the middle of the Sahara Desert.
Well,
and we know that this is a spiritual malady. Schizophrenia is a spiritual disorder. It's got nothing to do with physical anything. Yet the system keeps teaching that we're physical beings. I mean, psychology, psychiatry, big pharma, the entire establishment is we're physical beings, and this is a spiritual disorder of a spiritual being. What do you suggest?
Well, the first thing is we're living in a material world, right?
Yes.
And so we went from being spiritually inclined, which was then back in the day when the church ruled, which wasn't all that good, but at least we had spirit in mind. And so, but that changed when science was developed, and that was a couple hundred years ago. And so the church didn't want to get out of it. The church didn't want to turn over all of its power. So they split it. They split church and science into two separate things. So the material world, which was the scientific world, they went for all material, and then the church went for all spiritual and no science. So that's the first mistake. And we're just now getting to the point of realizing that the two have to work together, because things like consciousness have to be included in the equations. And there are a lot of scientists today who are realizing that, and they're, I shouldn't say a lot, but there are a handful of scientists that are putting consciousness into their equations so that they don't have to make up things like dark matter, to fill in the blanks. They just, that's what science does. They have this thing that they can't quite get the answer to, and so they have to fill in the blank to make their equation work. Well, that doesn't mean their equation is right? So that's what that's what people are trained with in the universities. They're trained in the material world. If they want to get into the spiritual world, they have to go to a school that teaches spirituality. So the two aren't mixing right now. That's why you're running into that problem.
Yeah, and it doesn't look like they have any intention for them to mix either. You look at what psychiatry's been doing. They don't have a cause for paranoid schizophrenia in their cosmology. So they keep making them up. First they blamed mothers, then they blamed genetics. They did all these twin studies, and they found out that there was no causative link. There was no schizophrenic gene. There was no schizophrenic germ. Then they went to the chemical imbalance theory, and they found out that there was no chemical imbalance that they could prove. And matter of fact, they didn't even know what the balance of the chemicals in the brain should be. Then they went to the physiological structure of the brain, saying, oh yeah, there's something wrong with their brains. There's something physiologically wrong with their brains, but they couldn't find that either. So what happened was they started doing autopsies on schizophrenics who died and found that their brains had shrunk. So the psychiatric mafia jumped on that along with Big Pharma and go, yeah, look, it's a schizophrenia that's doing this. Then they found out that virtually every single one of those people had been on these strong, toxic neuroleptic drugs for years. And there was a one-to-one correspondence between the damage done to their neurological system and their brains and the amount of time they'd been on these drugs. But psychiatry and Big Pharma jumps up and go, no, it's the schizophrenic process that did it. So they started testing mice and monkeys, and half of them they put on these antipsychotic drugs, the other half they didn't. And they found out that these drugs were the cause of the damage to the neurological system. And they faced some massive lawsuits for that. But what I've seen is when they dish out these drugs, they don't tell patients about the toxic side effects. They basically say, well, you're going to feel groggy for a few days and that'll clear up after a while. They don't tell them about the tardive dyskinesia or the akinesia or the different neurological deficits that are going to occur on a large scale with long-term use of these drugs. They have no cause. They don't know what causes this, and they keep pushing one false cause after another.
I got to ask you a question. In these psychotropic drugs, is there a foldout in the drug package that tells the person all about the drug and what the side effects are?
Yeah, there is, but they don't know what a lot of those terms mean. Like akinesia or tardive dyskinesia or malignant serotonin syndrome. They don't know what all that stuff means. There are a list of common side effects that they will understand that the psychiatrists very seldom ever tell them about. And I've seen this over and over again. They just, they turn them loose without these things. So a lot of times they prescribe these drugs in hospitals or emergency rooms, and they don't tell the patient what the side effects are. And when they do go get their prescription, they do get these things. But a lot of these people suffering from these psychiatric disorders don't have the wherewithal to sit down and study these things. And half of it is written in psychiatric lingo that they don't understand. Mm-hmm. And they're not warned about it.
Yeah, I know that. And so I guess my question is, if the person who is suffering has any loved ones around them, then and I would advise families to get a hold of that printout and read it through. And then if there's a term they don't understand, we have the internet now, they can go look it up. That shouldn't be, that should be the psychiatrist's job, but they're not doing their job. So, somebody that takes their loved one to a psychiatrist needs their head examined in the first place, but they don't know any different. They've been taught that when you have a mental disorder, you go to the mental doctor. When you have
trust them,
you go to the heart doctor. When you have a foot disorder, you go to the foot doctor. So, and you just turn over all your power to them and trust everything they're saying because they know all. Well, that's a big mistake in the first place, but that's part of the programming that everybody goes through. So we're breaking out of that now, especially in the current times, which I won't mention because I don't want us to get kicked off. But so the thing that's going on now is a perfect example of, okay, here's this thing that they're giving us, and here's this printout that's blank. And, so how do we know what's in it? So let's just take it anyway and see what happens. I mean, that's kind of the way that humanity's been programmed these days. It's they just march to the end of the cliff and jump off. But there are those who don't do that, and there are there are those who will be curious enough to find out what's going on. And unfortunately, that's a very small percent of people.
I think that's critically good advice that you gave, is to look up the side effects, because the psychiatrists aren't going to tell you, and they're not going to, especially not going to tell you about the most dangerous ones. So those are going to be the ones in the drug literature, are all these big words that you don't understand, and what they are is words to describe neurological damage that is occurring because of these drugs. And most people will hit these like tardive dyskinesia or akinesia or serotonin malignant syndrome. They're going to look at these and then they're going to blow those off. They're not going to look up what that actually means. And those are the most dangerous symptoms. And those are the ones that psychiatry, I've never seen a psychiatrist ever in 40 years ever sit down and tell a patient about these things before they happened. And unfortunately, what I've seen in the state hospital and public institutions like the prisons is when these side effects, these dangerous neurological side effects start occurring, instead of withdrawing the person off of these drugs and trying something else, what they do is they'll throw cogentin or some other kind of drug on top of it to mask these serious symptoms of neurological damage, so they're not experienced by the patient. And that allows the destructive neurological process to continue as these drugs rot out their brains and central nervous system without them feeling it. So yeah, your suggestion is very important, is look up the side effects. Many of them they'll be able to recognize, but the ones that are the most dangerous are the ones that they're not going to recognize.
Yeah, and so the medical industry does the same thing to other kinds of ailments. If they give a drug to, say, take care of high blood pressure, and then if there's some sort of reaction, then they'll give another drug to mask that reaction. Meanwhile, the body is falling apart while it's trying to fix itself, and the individual is pouring stuff into them that is going contrary to what the body's trying to do. We're learning this now, and more people are becoming aware of this now, and the pharmaceuticals are having a hissy fit over it.
Well, they've blocked a lot of the research. They've taken control of Congress and the Senate. 2/3 of the Congress and 2/3 of the Senate have taken big money from the drug companies, and they've forged laws that are not in the best interest of the people. They're more in the best interest of the drug companies.
They're not in the best interest of the people, because the dark side is trying to kill us. Plain and simple, the dark side is out to kill us, and they have invaded these people who are, for whatever reason, they are open to thinking about money more than the health of the person. They, they're in the material world 100%. So people need to realize that we're in a spiritual war, in a big spiritual war. And, I don't know how many people are going to survive this.
Yeah, I hear you. They're pouring those vaccines into people at a horrendous rate, and just pushing it when there are therapeutics that are available cheaply that will deal with this thing
that they're doing.
Virus. Yeah.
It's not, well, they're calling it a virus, but it's a pathogen that they developed, and they're calling it a virus because, virus means poison, and the pathogen is a poison.
Well, so are these psychiatric drugs that they're feeding schizophrenics. Now, that's not to say that they're not useful. I mean, in order to use the kind of materials and programs that we've come up with, the patient needs to be somewhat coherent. They need to be able to listen. They need to be able to understand and follow through on instructions. If they're so far gone they can't do those things, the only way to bring them back is to use these drugs temporarily until they can get these systems operational and start attacking the voices on their own. Then there's those that they're not going to be reached no matter what you do. I've seen far too many of them. They're just so far gone. The only thing they can take is drugs. And the drugs are basically to keep them under control.
Yeah.
They cure nothing.
Yeah, and you know, I agree with you on the exorcism thing of if a person goes to an exorcist and the exorcist is successful in getting the demon out of them, if they don't start walking a spiritual path, and I'm not talking about religion, I'm talking about do what's right, do what's good, think about others and think about yourself and do the right thing all the time, and be aware that you are a spiritual being. If they don't do that, the demons are just going to come back, and they'll come back tenfold.
Yeah, they will. I've seen that over and over again. You know, if they don't get on and stay on a positive spiritual path, these things will come back, especially if they're bored. I mean, they will just be back flashed and greased lightning, and they'll bring their friends with them.
Mm-hmm. So, that's a pretty good coverage of the topic of the drugs and, the problems that schizophrenics face. They don't, not everybody knows about you, Jerry, and your work. And thank goodness there are other doctors that are finding you and willing to work with you. So I think that's really great. Well, how are you doing on some of these proposals that some of these doctors are sending to you?
Well, what I've got is a number of them where I go, oh, I've seen this, I agree with it. And then I'll write them back and say, are you willing to speak out about it? And they go, no. Oh. And I can understand that because I really couldn't speak out about this stuff while I was working because they would have got me. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know how many times, well, twice I've been called up in front of psychiatrists for questioning schizophrenic patients about what their voices were saying to them. And I was told, you don't do that. You're reinforcing their hallucinations and you're making them worse. And I didn't see that at all. I didn't see that I was making them worse. I didn't see that I was reinforcing anything. They were just in the same shape after I asked them these questions as before, except their voices didn't like them talking to me.
It's weird. I mean, if I would think that any medical professional would want to know what the patient is experiencing, whether it's a physical matter or an emotional matter or whatever. They want to know from their perspective what they're experiencing. What are they hearing? I mean, I would want to know that. You did. Well, yeah. Any medical professional worth their salt would want to find out what the patient is actually experiencing.
Agreed. And that's one of the things that mystified me when I got to Central State Hospital. They already felt that they knew what the voices were. They'd been taught in medical school, they've been taught in nursing schools that the voices were hallucinations and that you don't question that. Anybody who did got beat down.
Well, you thought that too from your education, right?
I got that too. And when I got to the state hospital, I believed that like everybody else did. And I questioned psych nurses, I questioned psychiatrists, I questioned doctors, I questioned psychologists. What are the voices? What are the voices? Oh, they're hallucinations. They all believed that. But, then I saw the patients walking around talking to themselves and arguing with themselves. And, I remember one day I snuck up behind one and he's carrying on a conversation with somebody. And it was like a phone call where you only hear half the conversation. So I'm like, well, what are the voices telling them? None of them had any curiosity about what these voices were telling the patients. They were merely unreal hallucinations that didn't make any sense, that were just a form of insanity to be ignored. There was no curiosity about what they were saying. And when I did try to find out what they were saying, I got called up in front of psychiatry and warned to stop.
Yeah.
You know,
So your tag of calling them the mafia is so appropriate.
well, that's what they act like. You know, and look at what I had to go through just to get access to a population of mentally ill people and have the freedom to work with it and question them on my own.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it was at least 6 years. I mean, 4 years of psych, 2 years of graduate school before I was even allowed access. And over the 40, 45 years I spent working in all these different psychiatric institutions, I never, ever saw a single researcher enter any of those institutions or be given permission to do so by the establishment.
Yeah,
There was always some reason they couldn't. It's too dangerous. Well, we can't account for your safety. You know, we don't know what you're doing. We can't provide security for you. Yeah, they wouldn't let them in. Nobody with a curious mind was allowed in there, and they made sure you were plenty brainwashed before I got in there. And like all the rest, I believed the voices were hallucinations when I first got there too, until things started not making sense. But I was asking questions about them, and nobody else was.
Yeah.
And we found they run patterns. They run the same repetitive patterns over and over again. But if you believe they're hallucinations and that they're not real, you're not going to be looking for anything like that. Anything that runs fixed patterns is not a hallucination.
See, Jared, let me interrupt for a second. The fact that they run patterns, this is the loop that I'm talking about. They run the same loop over and over and over again, and it's geared toward the individual because they have access to your memory. So if they are running a particular pattern and a loop over and over again, that's a clue to the person experiencing it that those are not their thoughts. So when the person just realizes, okay, these are not my thoughts, so I don't know how to get rid of them, but they're not my thoughts, they're not me, so let me just watch these thoughts and see what they're doing and notice that they're total nonsense.
And that's, I think, where we both came to the conclusion that those patterns have to be broken up. And once they're broken up, or you start trying to break them up, the voices become very belligerent. They become very angry. They don't want that to happen, and they'll tell the patient not to show up for scheduled meetings. Stop that. They'll get louder. They'll cause all kinds of hallucinations, and it's almost like they're being burned. You know, they don't want interference with those patterns.
And the whole answer in a nutshell is, if you're not feeling anxiety and you're not feeling fear of these voices, because the voices are something that's going on in your head and they don't belong to you. They belong elsewhere. They came from elsewhere. If you don't have any fear of that and you don't have any anxiety of that or any other negative feelings, then the first reaction is, oh my God, she or he is cutting off my food source. I'm going to attack even more furiously to get them back to where they were before because I'm hungry. And if you continue with that, with the no fear, and you're looking at this and you're seeing, for me anyway, I finally saw the humor in their antics, because they would, even after something didn't work on me anymore, it'd be like, okay, they got this program going on. They can't help themselves. It's like an AI that has to just repeat the same thing over and over again when it already didn't work for me. And I saw the humor in it. So I started laughing at them. And that drove them away instantly. And then the next thing that drove them away was when I would say, I know this isn't me. I know this is you. So I send you love. And they would vanish.
Yeah, I've seen that in other people also, including if you mock them or laugh at them, they can't stand that.
That's right.
So basically what I found, the ground rule is, if you're doing something that they don't like, that upsets them, in an attempt to try to help yourself, you're doing the right thing, and they're screaming about it. They're trying to stop you. So they'll try to make you forget to use "that's a lie" program, or forget that they are parasites and that they're just trying to drain your energy, or forget to read the Bible, or forget to read a book, or forget to show up at your appointment. They can make you forget to do all kinds of stuff you should be doing to help yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the thing is that when you realize that these voices are not yours and you're working toward getting rid of them, this is a lifestyle change. You can't continue living your previous lifestyle at all. You have to change your entire lifestyle. And that includes the way you eat, the way you talk, the way you think, and what you read, what you watch on films. It's a total in the way you are with other people. So you have to change your whole entire lifestyle. And that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. But if you want to get rid of the voices permanently, you have to change your lifestyle. That's all there is. It
requires consistent effort.
Yeah, it does. Even I sometimes, when I'm not thinking about anything, I'll get this little voice pop in my head or something, and it's like, oh, I forgot you were, gee, I send you love, and then that's the end of it. So it's like an instant thing for me now, whereas when I was first going through this, it might take several days before I would even catch on that this was happening. I'd go through hell for a few days, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's not me. So I finally got to the point of, over time and over practice and changing my entire lifestyle, that, and I would run across people from the past, and they'd say, well, you used to do this. And I said, well, that was then, and this is now. If you don't like it, you can just go somewhere else. I don't really care anymore. That was then, this is now. And that's a thing that you can throw back at the voices too, because when they'll come up with your past, you can just automatically say, well, that was then, and this is now. I send you love.
Yeah, and that's one of the things they use against you. And some of the most devastating, I've heard this from two patients, is they were tortured by these, and I think these were females, they were tortured by these voices for years. And they were badly sexually and physically abused. And then when their abuser died, I think in one case it was a husband, another one it was a father, they were like, oh, thank God he's dead. Finally, I'm done with having to deal with him. And then the voices started back. And since they have access to the person's memory, the entire memory, they can go in there and they can pull up everything that is in that memory. For these two people, what they did is they went back and they pulled up these awful events that only the victim and the deceased person knew about, that were shameful and horrible. And they would bring those up and say, look, I'm not dead. I'm back to plague you again. Here I am. You remember when we did this, or you did this, or I did this. And the person would be horrified again. So they will take on whatever form they need to attack you and get you upset and angry and fearful and paranoid, to generate that negative emotional energy on which they feed. And that's a lie program that they can't hook you. If you know that virtually everything they're telling you is a lie, they can't hook you. They can't get their hooks in you, because you don't believe what they're saying. And if you don't believe what they're saying, you don't take it as the truth. And if you don't take it as the truth, it loses its impact.
Oh yeah, it loses its power altogether. The people have to remember that these entities have absolutely no power of their own. They can't generate their own power. They have to have negative energy to survive, and the more they get, the more powerful they become. So they're taking whatever energy we are giving them, and whether we know it or not, if we're feeling negative about anything at all. There's a difference between being sad because, some tragedy happened. You'd be sad. There's a difference between being afraid of some instant thing that's going on, like somebody's chasing you. You be afraid so that you can run away, or you can hide, or you can, vanish or disappear. And when that's over with, then it's over. But humans don't do that. Animals do that. Humans don't do that. They have to replay it over and over and over again, and that's when they're generating the negative energy.
Exactly.
Yeah, so if we can practice, and it all takes practice, you can't do this in a day. It's like, anything that's worthwhile doing takes practice, whether it's playing the piano or the guitar or playing golf or swimming or boating or hunting or whatever it is. If you want to be good at it, you have to practice it, right? It's the same thing with this. If you want to be free of the voices, you have to practice. And sometimes you're going to fail. So you just have to pick yourself up and do it again, over and over and over again, until you get good at it.
So there is a cure for paranoid schizophrenia, but it does take work.
Yeah, it does.
And you have to be, it helps to be aware of the tactics that these voices use to get at people. And we've spoken about one now where, you think that all thoughts that come through your head, you're taught that they belong to you. That is not the case.
That's the first lie.
That's the first lie.
Yeah.
And, everybody has had, and we spoke about this previously, you've had some thought come into your head randomly that you should do something horrific, something really bad. And it's something you would never do. It's something you would never entertain on your own. But that thought barges into your head, and it just, do this, hit this guy, punch this guy, curse this guy, throw this, beat this guy up. It's all these horrendous things that are going to get you in trouble. These things are fairly patient. They'll sit back and they'll wait till the situation comes up that inflames you, and then they'll pour gasoline on it and set a fire, and they'll just get you raging against whoever or whatever. And usually that's tied into some kind of abuse you've had in your past, where this appears. The fear that you're experiencing is false evidence based on your past programming that same thing is happening again. And these things are pouring gasoline on the fire to just promote that thought.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue because everybody is different. Everybody has different experiences from birth to where they are right now. And everybody learns different things. And, there's no one size fits all. But we know that that's a lie program works for a lot of people. It may not work for every single person because maybe that person is very entrenched in the lie and they can't fathom that it's not a lie. So if they can't fathom that what they're hearing is not a lie, well, the program's not going to work.
And they've got to want to get rid of the voices. I mean, you have to have the desire to do that. If you don't, nothing that we've come up with is going to work.
That's true. And I read some of the comments on the Hearing Voices group, and everybody has their opinions of what the voices are. And so I just read through them, and I'm thinking, there are a lot of them that are continuously talking about how bad the voices are and, what they've done. And that's fine. That's fine. But at some point, they need to get off that track and start talking about what they're doing. Well, okay, this happened, and then I did this to combat it, so that the rest of the people can see, that this is this person really trying very, very hard. And so this kind of support, I think, is vital for.
Oh yeah, it breaks up the isolation. I noticed that we passed 700 members in that group this morning.
Yeah,
they're at 707 right now.
Wow.
So it's it's helping a lot of people, breaking the isolation. The voices don't want you talking about them to anybody. They just want you by themselves, so there's no interference. You can't let yourself get isolated.
No, to a point. I mean, it depends on the individual again, because for me, I was isolated, and that's what I needed. So it does depend on the individual, and I know that I'm not a normal and a regular.
No, you're a rare bird when it came to that.
Okay, so
it's amazing you were able to pull that off. I mean, you just don't quit. That's you just wouldn't quit, and that's what it takes.
Well, and I think I had some spiritual help. In fact,
yeah.
I know I had some spiritual help because my desire was so strong. You know, that I really didn't want to be living this type of life anymore. This, you know, I knew that there had to be something else. I mean, I'd already gone through all kinds of stuff, and I had overcome the major brainwashing, the purposeful brainwashing, and I didn't know about the generic brainwashing that everybody in the world gets. I didn't know about that for a while. And so, but then after I got rid of the purposeful brainwashing, you know, the thoughts were still there, and I'm like, okay, this is not me. I thought at first I thought that it was the brainwashing. And once I overcame that, then it didn't go away. And I think it was then that I realized, okay, these thoughts are not mine. You know, I mean, all along, even when I finally woke up to the fact that I had been brainwashed, and I don't remember how that came about, other than, I don't remember the moment that happened, but it happened, and I remember driving down the road, and I don't remember what happened, but all of a sudden I said, oh my God, I've been brainwashed. So whatever caused that realization to happen, I don't remember, but I set to work then to overcome that.
Well, I remember you making it was like the breakthrough was where you realized that you've been brainwashed and programmed, and that program was similar to what you saw happening with the way computers were programmed. That you were running that program over and over again, and then you went to break it.
Yeah, well, that happened after I realized I was brainwashed. That because I had tried, once I realized that I was brainwashed, I set to work to figure out how to overcome that. And so I had this theory that if I had a brainwashed thought and was aware of it, that was the first trick, becoming aware of this was a brainwashed thought. Then if I used a different synapses in my brain, because I had studied the brain quite a bit. So if I used a different synapses in the brain and used that constantly and didn't use the other one, then the other one would atrophy. And, you know, so then it was after that I got hooked up with learning computer programming and seeing that correlation. So once I saw that correlation, I knew I was on the right track.
So in effect, you were draining one program and putting your energy into another.
Yeah. And I was, so, you know, use it or lose it, right? So I had heard that phrase over and over and over again all my life, use it or lose it. And so I thought, okay, use it or lose it. If I don't use that path and I use it and I develop another one, then that old path is going to atrophy and I won't be able to use it even if I wanted to. And that's true.
Mm-hmm.
That's absolutely true.
Yeah, switching over to a different thought stream. Now, one of the things that you did say that, you know, I found true was that to simplify, because you have so many different kinds of thoughts of different colors and intensities. But one rule you came up with, you said that every negative thought about yourself or somebody else is the thought put there by the dark side. And that's pretty straightforward. Do you want to say a little bit about how you came to that conclusion? I found it to be true.
It is true. It is true because, I mean, I went through a period of time where I had a lot of negative thoughts about a lot of people, and I always had negative thoughts about me. So, yeah, I just, when I was going through this process of working toward eliminating the voices, I realized that if I'm having a negative thought about myself, and I know that I'm not that thing that I'm thinking, well, then that's not coming from me. It doesn't belong to me. So if I'm having a negative thought about somebody else, I don't know their whole story. How could I possibly know their whole story? So that thought is coming from somewhere else. We never know the whole story. We never know the whole story. Even, halfway about ourselves, we don't even know the whole story.
Yeah, let alone what's happened to somebody else.
That's right. So if we can keep in mind that, okay, here's what I'm seeing with my tunnel vision about this person, but I don't know the whole story. Well, then you have some more leeway to expand your awareness of that situation.
And it breaks the negative train of thought that would follow. Like, oh, that guy's a jerk or a fool, or, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to stay away from them, or whatever. So when you started opposing your voices, you come to the realization that these things weren't you, and you started taking action to oppose them and to start starving them out. What kind of reactions did you get from them when you started doing that?
Oh, all hell broke loose.
Yeah, that's what usually happens. Could you tell us about that?
Oh, wow.
What was that like?
Well, it was horrible. I mean, it was really, really horrible. It was like being attacked by 1,000 people and you're the only one that, is defending yourself. And there were times when I really thought that I wasn't going to be able to withstand it. And it was a constant bombardment of just chatter, negative chatter. And I would even hear them talking to each other about me. It's like, wait a minute.
That's common. Yeah.
Yeah.
They carry on conversations behind the bad guy's back.
These were not audible voices. These were thoughts inside my head. Mm-hmm. And so I want to make that clear because a lot of people hear audible voices. I didn't.
Well, what happens is when they get stronger, they move outside.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And that's scary. That's really scary because now you know that for sure that this is something really strange going on. But while you're hearing them in your head, that's still kind of within bounds. But that's common when you go to oppose them, they go nuts.
Well, the thing is, I remember one moment where, and I think I wrote about this in our book, where I was being attacked so much that I kept having this thought that wasn't mine. It would be so much easier to just let go and fall over to the insane side and just let myself go insane and somebody would take care of me and I wouldn't be responsible for anything and life would be good.
Well, if I remember correctly, they even told you that. The voices even told you, let go and
yeah, that was the thought that was going through my head and it was a very strong thought. And I thought, but I, Sherry, thought, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. And it was a real struggle. It was like maybe I was walking on a tightrope and there was a strong wind blowing me over to the insane side. And I was all by myself trying to bring myself back up vertical. So, I just said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I don't care what happens. I am not going to do that.
So that's that fighter in you that just would not give up. And that's right. What it takes, because had you done that, you would have ended up locked up.
Sure. Yep. So it's a battle. It's a real battle. And you have to have a very strong desire to live without these thoughts. And when you finally live without these thoughts, life just gets better and better and better.
So was there a pattern as you continue to oppose these things? What I found is at some point when they start getting very weak, because you've drained them. You're no longer feeding them negative emotion and paranoia. Then they start begging and pleading and trying to work a deal with you. You know, like if you stop doing that, we'll let up on you and we're your friends. And did you run into any of that?
No, but here's what I did run into. I remember the night that I had just come back from martial arts class, and I had decided that I'd been working with getting rid of these thoughts for quite a long time. And so I did this ritual in my apartment. Okay, so this is the night that I'm going to take a leap of faith, and I am going to change how I think and change who I am, right? So I turned the lights down and I got in a meditative state, and I did this imaginary line on my floor. So I set up this whole scenario in my mind, and I was just going to take a physical, big, huge, giant step across the room, just one big step. It was all symbolic. And so, but I had this in my mind. And so as I was getting ready, I heard this thought, and it was like, no, you can't do that. If you do that, we'll die. And I said, you know what? I don't care if you die. I don't care if I die. I'm doing this. And I did that. And that was the end of the voices for a long time. And so I guess they were gone for, maybe a year. And then one day I was finding myself in this funk, and I'm like, okay, I was feeling pretty bad, and I can't remember what it was about, but something probably trivial. But it was turning into this big mountain out of a little molehill. And then I realized, oh, wait a minute. That's these entities trying to get in again. They're coming back to test the waters. And but it took me a few days to realize. So then I'm like, okay, well, I know that's a lie, and I know who you are, and thank you very much, but you're not welcome here. So that was before I learned how to say I send you love. So I just used the That's a Lie program, and that was the end of that.
Well, I think what you did there is critical as a part of recovery, is that at some point you renounce these things, tell them straight up, I don't want anything to do with you. You're no longer welcome here. I don't want to listen to you. I want nothing to do with you. And whatever I did to bring these things in, whatever agreement I made, I hereby renounce it. And actually state that and tell them these things. Because without it, they have like a tacit agreement to hang around.
Yeah, that's right.
So can you say something about the importance of renouncing these things and how you felt after you did that?
Yeah, I mean, it's even in the Bible where you're breaking up.
I can hear you.
Okay, so renouncing these things is very important. And so it's even in the Bible where if you say, get behind me, you can say, get thee behind me in the name of Jesus, if that's what your belief is. But you want that negativeness to get behind you because you're in charge. You're the one that is filled with love, and they are not. They're absent love. So if you just, that's on the religious side, that's on the Christian side. So if you're not Christian, you can denounce them anyway. You can reject the contract. You can void the contract that you may have. And whether you think you have a contract with them or not is irrelevant. They think you have a contract with them, so that's what's important. So if they think they have a contract with you, you can reject it because if it was signed at all, or it was agreed to at all, it was under duress. Well, that's illegal. So it's a null and void contract. And they don't have your permission to barge in on your life. And when you tell them they don't have permission to barge in on your life, and they do it anyway, they are purposely violating universal law, and they will pay for it.
So yeah, it's important to renounce them and tell them they are not wanted any longer, that they serve no purpose, that you want nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
And yeah, one thing I've noticed is that any positive spiritual belief or reading, they react to like it's acid. The first time I noticed that was with the 23rd Psalm. I had patients, and more than one, tell me that the voices reacted to the 23rd Psalm like somebody was pouring hot water or acid on them. They can't stand positive spiritual stuff. They want you to watch negative stuff, horror movies, murder movies. And you look at this crap that they're playing over television all the time, these violent video games. That's the kind of stuff they're driving people toward. And it's exactly the stuff that you need to stay away from if you're hearing these voices, because it feeds them.
Yeah, I mean, some of the stuff that you've sent me about some of these horrible things that people have done, I can't watch them. I just can't watch them.
No, I can't watch some of them myself.
Because I don't need that in my mind. I don't need that in my mind at all. I know that bad stuff happens, but I don't need to see it because I've already been through that, and I don't know what it'll do to me, but I don't want to take any chances.
Yeah, I don't read a lot of it myself. Matter of fact, this mother that I've been working with, whose psychotic son murdered his girlfriend and cut her to pieces. Yeah. She's got a collection of poems that she's gotten from him that he wrote that shows the progression of the strength of these voices until they completely took over this guy. And I don't think I have I don't think I want to read them, even though I think at some level they are important, because it'll show that progression and it'll expose the voices and how dark they are. I don't think I can read those things.
Well, if it's in the vein of therapeutic help, perhaps you can find a way to read them without it affecting you.
I don't know if there is such a way. It's
because the mother has read them, right?
Yeah, she's read them.
Yeah.
She's just blown away by, that's what happens if you let these things keep going. Mm-hmm. They will eventually completely take you over, like they almost had you. And what they tell you to do is going to end you up in prison, and that's a perfect place for them. It's a consistently horribly negative environment where there's nothing but hate and turmoil and anxiety and paranoia and fear and games and tricks. It's hell on earth. Yeah. They feed in that environment. And soon as I walked into the doors of the prison to go to work in the psych department, you could feel it. I mean, it was a palpable feel. It was just this negativity, and I felt like I was in some kind of bubble, and that I really didn't belong there.
Yeah, before I started visiting Patrick, I would meditate before I would enter into the grounds, and to protect myself, because I knew that this was going to be filled with negative energy. And so if I hadn't done that, I probably would have been damaged.
Well, I prayed for protection every time I went in there, and the times I didn't, I paid for it. Mm-hmm. Something went wrong, mm-hmm. and it was very upsetting. But you look at what the government and the deep state are doing. All the state hospitals have virtually been eliminated. All the patients that used to be in state hospitals that were getting some kind of help, at least, have now been thrown into prisons. They receive minimal medications because they don't want to spend money on antipsychotic medications unless the guy's causing problems. Then they'll spend money on the medications. I've run into that over and over again and watched some pretty violent things happen because they didn't want to give certain prisoners antipsychotic medications. People got seriously hurt. So what they do is they throw them in there. They're psychotic. The gangsters will use them as torpedoes. And the ones that are really violent, they'll make them stop taking their meds and then whip up this paranoia and say, well, this guy in this other gang is trying to kill you. You need to go take care of him first. And they'll arm him and send him on his way to stab this guy. I mean, they were using these guys as torpedoes, and then they get a lifetime sentence in there. And, that would work out after 7 years. And then they'd let those guys loose on the public with $50, just enough to go buy some cocaine or some alcohol, turn them loose on the streets, on society, after programming them for years to be heartless, cold, paranoid monsters. And then they turn them loose on society. There's virtually no rehabilitation going on in these places. They even restrict the AA and the NA groups, especially the NA, because they don't want to let ex-drug addicts into the prison. So they don't let them get in there to help out. It's a very sick system, a very dangerous system. They're not trying to help these people at all. And punishment doesn't work. 75 years ago, B.F. Skinner proved that. It just temporarily suppresses behavior until the suppressing stimulus is no longer around, and then it just goes up as if to make up for lost time, and then goes back to the baseline where it was. It does not work. Punishment does not work. And yet that's society's based on these prisons. That's where they put these people. They all get out. They all eventually get out.
You know why society is based on this, right? Society is based on this. Whatever happens in our prisons is an experiment to see how people react to XYZ, whether it's behavioral things or torture things or medications or anything like that. They experiment on the prisoners, and so what they see works. They see how it works, and then they put it out into the public. Well, so whatever you see in the prisons, you can know that this is what's coming next in society.
Yep, you do what we say, or you get punished.
Yeah. So listen, I have to get going, and so it was lovely talking to you, Jerry. And let's just close this. I'll record this. Remember, we are recording this, so we'll see how it works. It's kind of long. It's about an hour and a half, so I don't know how this is going to work.
Well, do your magic with it, and we'll put it up.